All right, Margie, thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jerry. It's so good to see you.
It is good to see you. It makes me feel young and old all at the same time.
We have not changed one bit at all
I
whatsoever.
have actually,
I don't know what you're referring to. We're exactly the same.
I'll tell you what, I told somebody from our class that we were going to do this together, and he had said that we both had not really changed.
I,
And
I agree. Whoever that is, they're brilliant. They're a really smart person. Whoever said that.
yes, the benefit I have is I was bald in college and I'm bald now. So it's like
Right.
there's not a massive amount of
No,
thing unless I just gain a bunch of weight. I'll tell you what gives it away. It's in the eyes. Like
I know.
I got the lines and the thing and it's in the
Hey,
eyes.
those are just lines of life experience, wisdom,
Hmm.
knowledge, happiness, all good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go with that. That
Yeah,
seems to work.
perfect.
So what I wanted to talk to you about, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about and bring you on is the concept of micro practice for chiropractors.
Yep.
And the reason I wanted to do that is because I think so many chiropractors, when they're getting started, if they've never even considered doing a micro practice or they don't even understand the concept at all, they can feel stuck, like they don't know how to get out of their associate position or how to start their own practice. And it becomes this kind of lack of knowledge or lack of options becomes like a prison for them. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of just start off and ask you, how would you define, like, what are some of the defining characteristics of what you would consider a micro practice?
Sure. What I currently practice in is what I consider a micro practice. And so it's like what it sounds. It's like a smaller version of, the more traditional practice model. But ultimately, it comes down to three things. A micro practice has low overhead, has high profit, and overall just like longevity in as far as like being able to sustain this type of a model. Now it's not to say that the traditional chiropractic model is bad or you can't do that, but there is an in between. It doesn't have to be like you're going from an associate to a 3,000 square foot office space.
Yeah.
There are stepping stones in between that you can take, um, just to be a little bit more financially conservative and a little smarter when it comes to getting into the whole aspect of owning your own business. So that's kind of more or less like the overview of what a micro practice looks like.
I was going to ask you this because um, when I got out of school, when we got out of school, um, I was pretty insistent on starting my own practice. I think the opportunities that were available to me aren't available to everyone because I had taken really good care of my finances and I was in a situation where I could get a loan. And so I know that that's not available to everyone, but at the time, I didn't consider doing something small, not partly because I could get a loan and I didn't have to, but I think the bigger reason was because I think there was like a pride element.
Oh,
There
of
was
course.
there was a part of me that felt like I'm not a real chiropractor if I don't have a certain amount of space or certain amount of equipment or certain amount of whatever.
For sure.
And can you speak to that? Like, is that an issue that you've seen or is that an issue that you've
Oh,
dealt with?
it's 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 frankly stupid. I'm going to be very honest with
Yeah.
how there is that feeling of I gotta be this model or this type of an office to be a real chiropractor. And I'm going to tell you like a true story. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to make it super awkward, but
Yeah.
um, so just as a quick background, my career in chiropractic includes having started and opened three of my own practices. So I did the same thing as you, straight out of chiropractic school. I opened my first practice. That was my first full-time job ever in my life, is opening my own practice. I was in downtown Chicago, had my own space, my own staff and all that kind of stuff. It was a smaller office. It wasn't even, I think it was like less than 800 square feet. So it wasn't a huge space, but it was my own place and I was very proud of it. And then I opened another practice in San Diego when we lived there. sold that because then I was pregnant, had my daughter, and decided being in practice at this time is not going to be great because we moved around as a family a little bit. So I found a space working for a company called Cash Practice. Cash Practice is a web-based software, helps with collecting money into your practice, but also helps with like your PVA and stuff like that. It's a great system. That's for another time. So my point though is that with Cash Practice, I worked for them for 8 years and had an opportunity to travel all over the country. I spoke at every big seminar that you can think of. I spoke at Parker, Las Vegas, which was like a big deal for me. And I kind of cried at the end of it because I was so like emotionally like just proud
Yeah.
of myself that I'd gotten to that stage. And it was in a room of like 400, 500 people. And that was a big deal for me. So anyway, long story short, I built up this really great reputation, I felt, in that world of chiropractic. So I was more on kind of the back end. I'm in the seminars, I'm getting to know all the other people in like the big companies in chiropractic. And we would see each other at these events and get together and get dinner and drinks and stuff. And that was great. So then came me kind of transitioning out of cash practice. Well, I still had cash practice when I started this chiropractic office I'm in right now. And I started this practice about 9 years ago. And there was about, I don't know, maybe like a 2, 3 year span where I was doing both cash practice and getting my private practice, my third practice up and running. And so I'm still going to these seminars, I'm still seeing the same people. And honest to God, was describing my practice, my new practice, to a fellow colleague. And he looked at me in the face and he said, I would never see a chiropractor like that. That's not a real chiropractor.
Yeah.
And I looked at this guy who I had thought we had a good relationship, we had a good rapport, and we had good mutual respect. And I said, that's the problem. Your statement and what you just said, that's the problem in chiropractic, is that you think it needs to be this model, and that if anybody else happens to do something else, they're not considered a real chiropractor. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I'm not friends with that guy anymore. Um, but it speaks to what you felt coming out of school, and it speaks to what a lot of students feel coming out of school. And it's kind of crap. I'm not going to lie. It's not fair
Yeah.
because I have an incredibly successful practice. I have, and I've built it in a really smart way where this time around for this practice that I'm in right now, I didn't have to get a loan out. I started this practice with less than $3,000, which is what, my husband and I had, little by little, we kind of were saving stuff away for a future office. And there was about 3 grand, in that little savings account about 9 years ago. And I said, well, let me see what I can do with this. I
Yeah.
started my Chicago practice with like about 30 grand, but let me see if I could do something on a smaller scale. And sure enough, I did. And now it's like this massive, huge success. And somehow I'm not a real chiropractor.
Hmm.
Yeah, that kind of stuff I can't understand. It's just a load of crap.
I actually, I've told people before, I don't think that me getting a loan was actually long term the best thing for me, because what I did when I got a loan is I had a this long landing strip of stupidity and
Sure.
laziness that existed until the money ran out. And I probably would have been better for me, even if it would have been because I got a six-figure loan. I got $100,000.
Oh, wow.
And so now I didn't spend it like a drunken sailor, but
But
I did my own build out. Like I was trying to be as responsible as possible. But when I got done and I started my practice, I had like 50 or $60,000 still just in the bank, just sitting there that I could just, and it doesn't really light a fire under your butt when you know that I,
yeah, you got something to fall back on.
I can make this work for a while. I mean, I don't, I'm in Belleville, Illinois. Like my cost of living is not high. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
so, but what happened was I struggled for probably longer than I would have if I would have had a shorter runway, and it just would have been more serious about the spending, about the decisions that I was making, about asking for help because I'm too proud to ask for help too.
Yeah.
And it just ended up in a situation where, thankfully I was able to pay that back. But in hindsight, I look back and I go, you know what? Younger me was not helped by that bigger loan. If I would have been given, 20 or $30,000 and said, figure it out, I still could have done my build out. I still would have had some runway, and I probably would have figured it out faster.
It's the part of having a practice that I call the hustle in owning any business, any
Yeah.
practice. You got to hustle in like the non-drug dealing sort, way of that word. You got to hustle to make this work, right? And my hustle, back in Chicago when I had my first practice and I had, we didn't have a family yet. It was just my husband and I, and we're living this great life in Chicago, and I have a lot of time to build up that practice. But I'm also in a huge city. In a mile radius of my practice, there were 25 other chiropractors.
Yeah.
So now how do I differentiate myself from those other 25 chiropractors? How do I make myself a success? And that was me, not only working in the business Monday through Friday, from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. some days, but then that's me doing events on the weekends. That's me doing, networking events, Chamber of Commerce events, taking my spine out to lunch, taking my spine out to coffee, the like spine that I had in chiropractic college, the spine I still have hanging by the output now because the little hooky thing broke.
Yeah.
I used to take that thing out to lunch with me and just sit there, like a crazy person with a
Yeah.
spine next to me. And people would be like, "Is that a spine?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a chiropractor. What do you know about chiropractic? You want to talk about it?" And sure enough, that's how I built a business because I had the time to do that.
Yeah.
Fast forward to this practice, and I have, now a young family, and my husband at the time was traveling like crazy for work. So the practice had to fit my family. My family comes first, even to this day. To this day, new
Yeah.
patient comes into the office, we start having our consultation, we start doing our rapport. I have a strategically placed large frame picture of my girls and their faces, and patients will all say, "Oh my gosh, they're so cute. Oh gosh, they're so cute." And I'll say, "Yeah, they are." I always like to tell new patients, they're my full-time job. This is my side gig. So if
Yeah.
they need me, I'm there. And
Yeah.
every patient, "Oh gosh, no, we totally understand. We totally understand." So I had to fit this practice around my family. And that also meant from a financial perspective, I just couldn't take the risk of dipping in to getting, I could have gotten $100,000 loan back then, no problem. But we just couldn't take that risk financially because I had to make it work. And that's where having that idea of a micro practice was way more appealing to me than anything else.
It is so unnecessary for chiropractors to put themselves financially further behind the eight ball. Like it is, especially now. It's like, I mean, when we were in school, someone leaving school with over six, somewhere between over $100,000 worth of loans is not terribly uncommon. Now you're hit 200, 250. I mean,
Oh,
it is
it's
unbelievable to me the
crazy.
numbers that I have heard people say that they have in student loans. And then on top of it, it's like you're going to make your financial situation worse by insisting on having a 6,000 square foot office, or not working out of somebody else's space because you're too darn proud. I talked to somebody the other day that he was starting his practice, and he was like, "Oh, I think I need to get a newer car because I drive an old Toyota, one of those Toyota Tacomas that's never going to die. It's like an early 2000s
What's that
Toyota." And
have to
he's like,
do with
"Yeah,
with
he
who
just
you are as a chiropractor?
well,
Because of what you
he
roll
thought,
up into?
yeah, he thought maybe people weren't going to really respect him as a doctor." And I told him, I said, "Dude, don't take this the wrong way, but you can't afford a nice car. Like, it's my neighbor has a Ferrari and a McLaren and some other stuff. He's got nice cars. I don't have nice cars. Like, that's a nice car. That's impressive. It's like you're just getting started in your practice. You can't afford a nice car. So, do you think
Nope.
the difference between your old Toyota pickup truck and a newer Toyota Camry is going to be the difference between you being successful? You're just making your life harder than it has to be. Like, don't
Right.
do that."
Well, I think that what ends up happening too, and I don't think it's just in chiropractic. I think there's lots of kind of professions, medical doctors, attorneys, um, kind of when you get into that doctorate level where there's just this sense that, oh, I'm going to be guaranteed a lot of money. So I'm not really worried about
Yeah.
these loans and then these loans and then these loans and this credit card debt and this other credit card debt because I am
Yeah.
going to be making bank. So, you know what, who cares, right? And uh, I was in our class, we had a tremendous amount of full student loans, then taking out
Maxed
these
out.
loans to
Yep.
do these other practice management situations that luckily didn't work out for all of them, and all this other stuff that you just like looking at this thing add up, and it's like, and some of our classmates are buying new cars with their student loans.
one of one of our classmates, and I would tell you who after we stop recording if you're interested. One of our classmates bought a Rolex.
Again, we don't need to name names, it's all right. But it's just the stuff that like, I when I was at school, I I studied a lot. I was in class a lot. And then I was like, can I find like some odd job on campus to help offset? Like I know I can get this much money if I go up to the third floor to go pick up my checks. I know that I can get that much, but I also read the fine print that said like I don't have to take out that much. I can write
Yeah.
how much I want to actually take. And so I kind of said, okay, take the tuition. Obviously, you need to pay the tuition. And then what is like the bare minimum I can get by with? And then I'm
Yep.
gonna, you know, TA biochem and diversified and, you know,
Yep.
I mean, the cadaver lab guys, I mean, those guys, guys and girls, I'm sorry, girls too. I mean, they made like $50 an hour,
Yeah.
working in the, I mean, I don't want to work there, but still like there was like,
Yeah.
there was the future of like, how am I going to pay this back?
Yeah.
And I don't know that's another thing that I think chiropractic students then and now are just being totally misled to what the actual reality is going to be.
I did that. I mean, when we were in school, the reason I went to Logan is because it was close enough that I could commute. And one of our classmates, one of my best friends in our class, his mom literally lived a mile and a half away from my parents' house. And there's no reason that we couldn't have commuted together because we hung out together all the time anyway.
Sure.
But he didn't want to be from Illinois, and he wanted to have his own place and it's
Really?
like, yeah, I did. I used to pack my lunch all the time. Like I'd brown bag it, and some of
Oh
my
yeah,
buddies would give me crap because it's like I was just trying to get out of this with as little debt as possible
totally.
because, and I didn't care if I drove an old car with 170,000 miles, and if I didn't care about any of that stuff. And it's unfortunate when I meet young chiropractors who do put a lot of stock in that, and because life's hard enough. You don't need to
Right.
bury yourself financially before you're even 30.
If if I ever had a patient like say something to me about my car and like questioning my level of like experience and whatever because of my car,
Yeah.
I'd be like, sorry, I'm not taking new patients. I don't think you're a right fit for my practice anymore. See you later. I like that just yeah. It's tough,
Yeah.
but it's tough though. There is this persona and this perception that, oh God, you got to be this big, huge thing. In my mind, though, it's like, why not, you know, the, the great idea of the micro practice model, like having this, smaller kind of practice into practice. And like, let's talk a little, I think, about the logistics of how this looks like and what this actually means. So, whatever it was, like about 9-10 years ago, 9-ish years ago, I started feeling this demand in the town that we moved to here in Northern California, start feeling this demand for opening a practice. I wasn't actually planning on opening a practice again for another about like 3 or so years until my youngest daughter was in kindergarten. That was kind of what we had kind of laid out. But then it kind of was coming on a little strong to the point where it just was feeling I was missing an opportunity. And so I thought, okay, let me just look around. Let me look around what some other options are of maybe a room I can rent. Because
Yeah.
I could run a one-woman show. I don't need a staff right now. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, my schedule is based on the kids And so I don't even know if I can keep a consistent schedule, and it might fluctuate from like day to day, week to week. So let me just see. So I was on the hunt to rent a room from someplace else, and I looked in chiropractors' offices, massage therapist, physical therapist. But what was important to me, because again, this is about me and my life and my family, is where this office was located in proximity to my home and to the schools.
Yeah.
And so I didn't find a Craigslist ad. I didn't find like a marketplace ad. I literally walked into these businesses, knocked on their doors, shook their hand, looked them in the eye, and said, "This is who I am, and this is what I'm trying to do. Do you happen to have any space available that I
Yeah.
can rent from you?"
Or do
And
you know someone,
yeah,
that's,
and the first person, the first chiropractor, the first guy that I rented from, he like looks at me when I walked into the space. He's like, "Huh, just been thinking about, bringing another provider in." I go, "Okay, well, let me see your office." And so he shows me around the space. And there was a room kind of like towards the front desk that the door's closed. He opens the door, it's full of boxes. And I said, "Well,
yeah.
what's this?" He's like, "Well, it's storage." And I go, "Well, if you clean it out, I'll pay you money." And he's like, "Oh, really?" Yeah. So I kind of took my way into this guy's office, more or less. And it worked out great. And the office, and then because some years later, he sold his practice to another female chiropractor. She and I now have worked together for about 6 years. We've moved since. So that first location, we kind of moved, like it was like right across the street there. So we moved
Yeah.
across the street. But at the end of the day, I am 1.5 miles away from my home, and
Yeah.
I am about 2.5 miles away from my kids' schools. And so I have the nurse calling me sometimes saying, "Hey, a kid's got to get picked up." And I literally leave right there. There could be a person waiting in the waiting room, and I'll say, "Guys, I'll be right back. I gotta go."
Yep.
And that still happens every so often. That will happen. Um, so I started very small. I paid him initially for that initial room. I paid him $600 a month in rent. That's
Yeah.
it. How many patients do I need to see to cover $600 a month? Not very many. I don't need to adjust that many patients,
Yeah.
And so from there, I was able to build like a slow and steady office, because again, that's what I needed for my family. My income wasn't necessarily going to totally make or break our family's day-to-day living. Obviously, I had the luxury of my husband's income providing for us. So now I have the ability to build a practice on my own terms and really kind of accept the patients that I want to work with. So I was not accepting every new patient. I was only accepting patients that I knew I was going to get really good results with. And then the
Yeah.
other patients that were not within my wheelhouse necessarily, I was referring to other providers. The absolute beauty of this whole thing is I did not accept any insurance payments
Yeah.
anymore. I was done with that. I had done that in the past two practices.
Yeah.
And I said, there is no chance we're doing that with this one. So this has been a cash only practice from the get go.
So I had a thought in my brain and then I got sidetracked because I was writing something down.
Because I
I
was
was
grounded.
actually, yeah, oh gosh. The interesting thing about the cash practice model, and you were talking about it working for you and your situation with your family and everything else, is it also works. It works even if you don't have those same sort of restrictions that you do,
Totally.
because I've
100%.
never, and this is why I'm such an advocate of this for chiropractors who are getting started, or even chiropractors that are struggling. It's like, if you need to reset, if you have a life reset or something happens, and sometimes life just kicks you in the pants and you just have to you have to reset. If that's the case, the micro practice is a great option, because I've personally I have not worked with any chiropractors that go from not making money to their heads above water faster with any other model.
Yeah.
It is the way. I don't care if you're married, not married, single, old, young, it doesn't matter. If you are struggling to make money and you need to get your head above water, which is so incredibly important if you're going to be successful as a chiropractor, you got to get your head above water. The going from drowning to head above water, I've never seen anybody do it quicker than people that do micro practices. It's, to me, it's the fastest way.
It's just it's smart because it's a low overhead, high profit, Like you keep more money. If I would
Yeah.
have done a micro practice model when I first opened my first practice in Chicago, I would have a lot more money now than if I than what I chose to do. And
You
that's
and me,
okay.
you
We
and
went
me
the model
both.
because that's what we were taught to do.
Yeah.
I just then later gathered some more life experience and thought like, man, I don't want to have my own big practice. And at the time too, I was like, I don't want to work for anyone else because
Yeah.
I just can't commit myself to like somebody else's schedule. It's got to be my on my own terms. So yeah, you
Yeah.
can totally take out the life factors of like family or children, or whatever it is, or the factor that again, I'll be honest, I had the cushion of knowing that my husband's salary, covered us, right?
Yeah.
So, but maybe that's not the case for you. And maybe you're a single parent who has children and you do need to make it and you need to make money quick. Yeah, it's you go into a low overhead model. You can always grow up from small. You could start very small and start gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's
Yep.
exactly where I am right now. I about 3 years ago 3 years ago. So the space that I'm in right now, I'm in a suite with another chiropractor and I rent from her. So I'm a subleaser technically
Yeah.
from her. I started off by renting this one room that I'm in right now. About maybe 2 years ago, I started renting another room from her because my practice was getting kind of big and kind of busy. Um, about a year and a half ago, I hired an assistant, a chiropractic assistant. So prior to that, I had done everything myself. I was a one-woman show, managing everything myself because I didn't have to deal with insurance.
Yeah.
So it was really easy. And I'm also not collecting money every time. I have their credit cards on file and I'm running their payments
Yep.
either at the end of the week or they're on some kind of a plan that's automatically running. So all that
Yep.
was really easy to manage and maintain until it wasn't because it was just getting too big. Now I'm at a point where I am ready to get more space and more space on my own because that's again where my business is. I have the justification in my bank account, in my patient ledgers, and my patient volume to now say, hey, now it's a good time now to go get your own office. But I'm looking at like 15, 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet.
But
Right?
you have proof of concept. Like
Correct.
chiropractors that are getting started, they've never done their own practice or they've never done their own practice successfully. They have no proof of concept. They don't know
Yeah.
who they are. They don't know what they want to do. They don't know if it's going to work. They don't know if they have to pivot. And to put yourself in a situation where it's such high risk is to me, I think one of the reasons that we have such a high fallout for chiropractors
Burnout
within our
for sure.
profession is that chiropractors put themselves in terrible situations because they're not given better advice from the start.
You should prove yourself like as a chiropractor first and as a practice owner before you start going into these big mega spaces. Like you're saying, proof of concept. And, the mistakes I made maybe like 6 years ago, they didn't kill me financially
Yep.
because I'm still looking at like, at this point, I have to adjust 30 people a month to cover my necessary overhead.
Yeah.
30 people a month. I just that many people in a day most days.
Yeah.
So so that means everything else that comes into my business is just gravy, cherry
Yeah.
on top. I don't have to stress about like new patients and numbers and volume and stuff like that. It is such a beautiful model. I don't market. I mean, I have social media, obviously, but I don't I don't go to marketing events anymore. We have a wait list now for
Yeah.
patients to start in the practice, so it's like, yes, I think I've proved myself to now step in and say, okay, now I'm ready to get a bigger space on my own.
Practices also have momentum. Like people don't necessarily understand that either. I mean, one of the hardest things when you're starting a practice is when it's like you're pushing the snowball down the hill. It's like you getting the snow together to give it a good push is the hardest part. And
Right.
if you can start small, you start smart and you get some momentum, it is easy to go from, I mean, as long as you didn't commit to 10 years of renting a room, which is just dumb, but it's
No.
like, it's easy to go up if you want to go up,
Right.
or you may fall in love with the simplicity of it and want to do it forever. And
Yeah. And that's okay too.
yeah, perfectly fine.
Or the other nice the other nice option for this model is, man, let's say you have been just grinding in chiropractic for 30 years. You've had this mega successful practice, and gosh, you just want to slow down.
Yep.
And you don't really want to do the big thing anymore. You don't want to have to see the high volume. You don't want to have, because a lot of that is to kind of cover the 4,000 square feet that you have to cover every month. So now, well, great, downsize.
Yeah.
Still see your patients, downsize, or maybe, downsize and fire some patients, take your most favorite patients and say, hey, I'm going to be moving into a smaller space and I'm going to be traveling more, whatever it is. So it's still a beautiful way to still practice without feeling like, oh, I am going to be exhausted by the time I'm 50 or 60 years old.
When I closed my practice, I had no intention of doing anything within chiropractic. I wasn't even planning on doing this. I was gonna go off and do some internet marketing stuff and some other things. It's like you want to make God laugh, show him your plans, right? But what was funny about that, now that you say that, is I moved about 30 minutes away from where my practice was when I closed my practice.
Hmm.
And I had a group of patients that were basically like, listen, we know you're not going that far. And I saw patients out of my house for several years
Hmm.
after closing my practice because it was side money. Like I was starting another business and starting a new thing. And it was,
Yeah,
it was people that I liked, people I was perfectly comfortable with having in my
totally.
house. And I had never really even considered until you said that that's what I was doing is I
Yeah,
basically had my little micro practice out of my house. It was
totally.
cash. It was just, you
It's
know,
easy, it's fun,
yeah,
and like you're saying, like you took, like your most favorite people. So why
yeah,
not just do that like in your own practice now? But again, a lot of times there is this stress and strain of having to cover that amount every month.
yeah,
And I got to cover that amount with this many patients and this many visits and this much collections. And so sometimes I think chiropractors end up taking on patients that either it's just not the right fit,
yeah,
um, because at the end of the day, you're not going to get the results that you want for that patient, and then that patient's not going to be happy, and then your reputation has a potential to go down. And so that's always my big thing in practice too. I'm not going to make any exceptions to my rule on who I'm taking, because I'm going to lose the patient's results, I'm going to lose my reputation.
yeah.
And those are things that you just cannot get back.
Well,
And so I say no to new patients, all the time, every week.
well, that's actually the one of the reasons that I try to emphasize the chiropractors that it's important to get your head above water because when your head's below water, you make bad choices.
Totally,
Like
100%.
you say yes to things you shouldn't say yes to, you say no to things you shouldn't say no to. Like you make
Hmm.
terrible choices when your head's above water and you're drowning.
Right. Correct. Agreed.
So let me do this. I'm going to take a quick sidestep because it was something that you had mentioned, and I wanted to talk
Okay.
about this before we get done. Is you
Uh-huh.
had mentioned being in Chicago, being around tons of other chiropractors,
Hmm.
getting started, and trying to figure out how the heck do I make myself like why choose me over anybody else that might be closer, cheaper, whatever. How like take me through that thought process because we had talked about this real quick right before I started recording about how so many chiropractors just don't know who they are, they don't
Yeah.
know what they have to offer, they don't know why someone would choose them. So take me through that process of your thought process and how you go about doing that or how you went about doing that.
So the one of the first things I did when I chose my office space and it was getting kind of fixed up, I my heart and instinct said, I'm going to go meet all my brothers and sisters in chiropractic. And I'm going to go knock on their doors. I'm going to meet them. I can't wait. And my experience prior to that was as a student, any place I would go on vacation or wherever I am, I'm like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
there's a chiropractor. Let's go check him out. And I'm just randomly walking into people's offices and, oh, you're a student. That's so great. Oh, welcome. Oh, you want to see what my forms look like? Take a look at this. Oh, you want to, you want to shadow me for a while? Yeah, come on in. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that works when you're on vacation, you're a student.
The minute I am now in business, 23 out of the 25 chiropractors pretty much laughed me out of the office.
Yeah.
And I got the like, great. Another
Another
competitor
one. Yeah.
in the area. Two chiropractors were amazing to me and very warm and welcoming. And to this day, one of those chiropractors is still an incredibly close friend of mine. She and I are in close contact when I'm back home in Chicago visiting my family. I will sometimes go up to the city to go see her. We send Christmas cards together. She's the best. So that was what I initially did. I gotta go meet some. I gotta find my people, right? And so I found
Yeah.
two people. That was fine. That was great.
Yeah.
And then I just started doing some research, like, okay, how am I going to build up this practice? Because here's the other thing about that practice. I was not a storefront. I did not have signage. I
Yeah.
was not on the street level. I was a second floor suite inside of a building that you had to like know to go into.
Yeah. Nobody's finding you by accident.
No one's finding me by accident. I don't have anything saying that I'm there. I had a website because that was revolutionary back then to have like a website for your business.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, so now what am I going to do? All right. So I start doing the things that I remember working. I remember being taught in some of our business principles classes or whatever. And it's, one of our instructors told us our success in chiropractic is going to be linked to how we can effectively communicate chiropractic to every single person. And that effective communication is different for everybody. And you have to figure out what people know about chiropractic, what they don't know about chiropractic. And so, like I said earlier, I'm taking my spine out and just kind of aimlessly walking around. I'm walking around to every business owner in the area, shaking their hand, giving out my card, because the business card was a big deal back then. Not anymore, really anymore. But, so I'm going around, I'm getting to know people, and I'm learning that the more I get to know people and I get to figure out how I can help them in business, then in turn it comes back to me. So it never was, I wasn't always going in there just to be like, oh, I just want to tell you all about me and all about my practice and who I am. I really, truly, genuinely wanted to get to know my fellow business owners because, Chicago is huge, but it's broken into these little communities.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it such a quaint place that people like to stay and live in, is that, the Lakeview community that my business was amazing. And all of us business owners were very supportive of one another. So then I found the Chamber of Commerce and I joined the Chamber of Commerce and would go to these networking events and I would talk to people about their businesses. They would ask about mine. And then from there, I actually learned of another business networking group called LaTip.
Mm.
And that was like a BNI kind of a thing, right? And I had been approached by a person at a networking event saying, hey, we're starting this. No, actually, that group was Leads Club, is what that group was called. I was in LaTip a different time. I got approached by a woman saying, hey, we're starting a group. It's called Leads Club, and it's a female only business group, and we don't have a chiropractor yet. Would you be interested? And I'm like, absolutely, yeah, let me check it out. And so you go to these events, and
Yeah.
they're a once a week event where you sit down with a group of other business owners, and the whole point is to send, leads back and forth to each other. Now it
Yeah.
costs something to be in it, but if I got even one patient out of this group, it would cover my cost for the year and then some. So I was in that group, and that group single-handedly helped build my business. We were a group of like 30 female business owners, and on average, we passed about $350,000 of business a year to each other. So I learned a lot from these women, just from a business building perspective. But at the same time, that's where I built a lot of my business. And then it turns into kind of a referral-based practice. I was doing spinal screenings. Remember those with the weights
Yeah.
and like the
Yeah.
thing scale, and you'd like match up their like
The
shoulders,
posture
and,
exams. Yeah.
whatever that thing was called. Yeah, yeah. I carried
I
that
think it
thing
was called a
around.
Posture Pro.
Posture Pro. That's great. Yeah. Well,
I
that's
think
actually
that's,
an app now, I think.
oh, wait, is
But
it?
anyway, I did those. I just did, honestly, it was whatever I can do to help build up that practice. And I would say within about 6 months of being in that practice in Chicago, I was at about 120 patients a week of patient visits, which for me was great. I was
Yeah.
never built for and never wanted to be a high volume girl.
Yeah.
The volume that I'm at now, the volume I was at back then, that was great for me. That was great to, cover my overhead, make money, bring money home. Um, and it was a successful model. So that's just to kind of finish up. That was the main way I built that business in Chicago, was so much networking, so much just, person to person kind of marketing and networking. That was it.
Was it talking to people? Was it just getting your hands on people and evaluating results? Like what was it that helped you become more comfortable and figure out who you were as a chiropractor? Because like when you're I feel like, at least I know my experience when I first got started, I was saying yes to everybody because
Right.
you sort of don't know. And then as
I
time goes
mean,
on,
yeah,
you
same.
you you get more comfortable being able to talk to somebody and evaluate someone and just be like, oh, great fit. This is home run.
Hmm.
Like you're talking about, like you're only taking the people that you can help.
Right.
Like how did you go through that like what was it that helped you become more comfortable with knowing this is who I am, this is my high value where I can offer that?
It was definitely working directly with patients.
Yeah.
And, it was, I'd say like 80% working directly with patients, maybe 20% just communicating with people in general when chiropractic would come up. And so, as I'm working with patients, and again, being a business owner, I don't know any better. Yeah. Yeah. You have that going on? Sure. Come on in. That sounds like a
Yeah.
great, whatever. I'll look it up. I'm sure I can figure it out. Right. Uh, I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, and
I've
it's
been
not,
there.
again, I mean, if something was massively outside my, scope or area or whatever, then yeah, I'd be like, I don't know about that. But for the most part, I was definitely a yes doctor back then. And, but then I started like kind of realizing like, oh man, I don't really like these cases. I don't really like
Shoulders,
the
not a
what?
shoulder guy. I said
Shoulder,
shoulders. I'm not a
shoulders.
shoulder person.
Shoulder. Well, my funny story that I always tell people when I'm describing, where I am now, because again, it's because I have all this experience and I know what I'm good at, I know what I can help, and I know what I can
Yeah.
get results with, and I know what I'm not good at. Right. So a couple of years ago, I get a phone call from a gentleman, and anytime, even before I make an appointment with somebody. I used to do it myself, but now my assistant does it. We do like a screening process with the patients, and we simply say, what's why are you calling? What can we help you with?
Yeah.
Who sent you, right? I want to know who referred you,
Yeah.
um, how you heard about me. If you heard about me through like a great patient who's active right now, you're going to get a little bit higher on my list versus if you said you found me on Google. Not to
Yeah.
say I don't take any Google referrals, but you know what I mean? Like there's just like a different
Sure.
uh,
There's different
quality to
tiers.
that.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
Looking good, right? And so I had a guy call me a couple of years ago. I live just outside of Sacramento, which is the state capital of California. San Francisco is about 100 miles from us.
Yeah.
And so there's lately been a big influx of people from the Bay Area moving up to our town in our area. And so this gentleman calls me and he says, yeah, I moved up here and I need a new chiropractor. I was working with my chiropractor in the Bay Area about my elbow, because I'm a professional violinist and my chiropractor would work on my elbow for about 20, 30 minutes every time. And it really helps with the pain and
Yeah.
discomfort and my ability to
Yeah.
perform. She's on the phone and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell do you do for 20 or 30 minutes on an elbow? I don't know, And so I
Yeah.
just stop him right there and I say, you know what, sir, I'm glad we had this conversation, but I'm just going to be very upfront with you. I don't think that I'm the right fit for you.
Yeah.
But you know what? I have a great chiropractor who I think would be a better fit for you to work together with. Why don't I pass her information to you and you follow up with her? And guess what? They were a great match together.
Yeah.
She was great with the elbow and has some stuff to do for 20, 30 minutes. And he loved it. It was a great
Yeah.
setup, right? I don't I don't, and plus I don't want a bunch of elbows coming in. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone has an elbow, but I don't want to have to work on a whole bunch of elbows coming in. That's not my jam.
I know my interest when I first started chiropractic, I was super interested in upper cervical and I did
Hmm.
mostly upper cervical when I was in practice. And that actually, I think, helped define kind of who I was because I was so specific in what I was doing.
Yeah.
That actually helped me. And in hindsight, I look at it and I go, that helped me in ways that I didn't understand because from the beginning, I kind of knew there's certain things I wasn't going to do. There's certain things that were going to be a bad fit. if people are looking for certain things, like I'm not your guy because I'm doing something completely different.
Mhm.
And that actually helped. But I think every chiropractor can take that concept, and even if
Yep.
you're doing fairly generic care, is you could take that concept and say, you know, what's my wheelhouse? Like, what do I have? Where do I have the most value to offer? And what is the stuff that I'm not good at? And if you're trying to just help everybody with a spine and you don't get specific in your brain and in your approach and in your acceptance and in your rejection of people, if you don't get specific, your practice just becomes a hot mess pretty quick.
Right. And I think it's okay too for an initial, like initially chiropractors just being fair to themselves and give themselves some time
Yeah,
to figure
sure.
that out.
You don't
Because
know.
yeah, again, who you were in college and like right out of college, that might not be who you are now. I'll be honest, I didn't like kids. Before I had kids, I didn't like kids. In my first practice in Chicago, parents would be like, "Well, can you adjust my kid?" And I'd be like, "All right, yeah, sure, I guess." Like I just wasn't my thing. And
Yeah,
then I had kids and I became a mom and I went through, the
yeah,
certifications and stuff like that. And I got babies and kids coming in here all day. Like the
yep,
majority of the patients are babies and kids. And then the minority are adults. And so like I would have never thought this was going to be my practice model
yep,
at all if you asked me, 20 years ago. So I think it's okay. It's okay to pivot on that a little bit and to
yep.
change what that may or may not be. But ultimately, it comes with experience. So you just get the experience and you say, yeah, these are the cases I love. And you will have those moments. You'll have those moments where you took a patient, you accepted a patient, and you, in your gut, we're kind of like, I don't know if I should have. And
Yeah.
then that patient will prove it to you that you shouldn't have taken them as a patient. Not anything bad or detrimental, but something will happen. And you'll be like, oh, man, I should have listened to my instinct. I should have listened to my gut. And then you will listen to it more often moving forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're just things that will happen.
I've rarely gone against my gut when I was in practice and was happy about it in the long
Yeah,
run.
no,
Like it's
nobody's happy about
unusual.
going
It's
against it.
unusual that was a good idea.
Yep, agreed.
So I know you have a hard cutoff here. We're going to wrap this up. Is there anything that you felt like saying or wanted to say before we finish up?
I don't I don't think so. No, I think we covered a lot and I'm always happy to help chiropractors if they have questions and need some guidance somewhere. I don't have all the answers, but I know a few things about a few things. So
Yeah,
always happy to help. So just send them my way. You can just put my Instagram
I'll put your
handle on
information
there.
in the
Yeah,
show notes.
yeah, you can send them my way. Happy to help.
That's
Just want
that's
to
what
see
I say.
chiropractors do well. That's what I want.
I don't know everything, but I know a few things, mostly from making mistakes.
Exactly, exactly.
I fail forward.
That's right.
All right, Margie, thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to
I
you
know
later.
it's so good to see you.
Yep. I'll see you
Yeah.
later.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.